I was lying flat on the cold concrete of my garage floor, staring up at the rusty undercarriage of my pickup truck, and I suddenly realized my legs could not push me back up. If you give me just a few minutes of your time right now, I promise I will show you exactly how I made sure I never felt that helpless again. It was a Saturday morning. The weather was perfect. I had slid under the truck on a piece of old cardboard to check a rattling exhaust pipe, something I have done 1,000 times in my life without a second thought. I finished the job, rolled out from under the heavy steel chassis, and shifted onto my side to stand up. I planted my heavy work boots on the concrete, put my hand on the front tire, and told my legs to lift my weight. Nothing happened. The muscles in my thighs just trembled. A cold, sharp sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I tried again, pushing as hard as I could, but my knees felt like they were filled with wet sand. I was completely alone. My wife Linda had gone to the grocery store. For almost 10 minutes, I had to drag my body across the dusty concrete floor over to my heavy wooden workbench, grab the thick edge of the wood with both hands, and violently haul myself up, using nothing but my shoulders and my arms. When I finally got to my feet, my legs were shaking so badly I had to sit down on an overturned plastic bucket. I just sat there in the quiet garage, breathing heavy, staring at my own two hands. That was the exact moment the heavy wall of pride completely collapsed. I realized that the slight hesitation I had been feeling on the stairs, the way I had started looking for handrails everywhere I went, and the heavy dead feeling in my legs every afternoon were not just passing aches. My physical foundation was failing. I was losing my independence right there on the garage floor, and I was deeply terrified of what was coming next. I spent 33 years working on the concrete floors of a distribution warehouse right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. For over 3 decades, my legs were the primary engines of my entire life. I walked miles every single shift. I climbed up and down the steep, grated metal stairs of the loading docks. I pushed heavy steel carts loaded with freight. I lifted, I squatted, I pivoted, and I never once thought about the muscles doing the work. You do not think about your legs when you are younger. You just expect them to be there. You treat them like a pair of heavy-duty shock absorbers that will last forever. But when I retired, the constant heavy movement stopped, and the quiet deterioration started. It crept in so slowly I barely noticed it at first. I started sitting more. I started taking the easy way around the yard. And slowly, silently, my body started stripping the muscle right off my frame. It was not until I was trapped on the floor of my own garage that I realized how much ground I had already lost. I did not want to tell anyone what happened. Most men from my generation are built exactly the same way. We would rather swallow broken glass than look our families in the eye and admit our bodies are losing their strength. We just push through the fear, ignore the weakness, and pretend everything is perfectly fine until the day we take a bad fall and end up staring at the ceiling of a hospital room. I was heading straight down that path of pride and silence. But my daughter Megan catches everything. She is an occupational therapist. She spends her entire week working with older folks who have lost their mobility, folks who ignored the exact same warning signs I was having until their legs simply gave out entirely. She came over for Sunday dinner the next day. I tried to walk normally, but my shoulders were incredibly sore from hauling my own weight up off the floor, and I was walking stiffly. She pulled out a dining chair, sat me down, and looked right at me. I finally told her what happened in the garage. She did not lecture me. She did not act surprised. She just told me what she sees at her clinic every single day. She explained that the sudden weakness I felt was not some mysterious disease. It was the direct result of a body that had stopped being challenged, and so it had stopped keeping its strength. She opened her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. It was a clinical study she had been reviewing for her patients. It tracked a large group of senior men and women over a 15-year period. The numbers on that page burned themselves into my memory. The study proved that without deliberate daily intervention, folks our age can lose up to 3 to 5% of their total muscle mass every single decade after 60. And the very first place that structural loss shows up is in the power and the stability of the lower legs. My legs were not failing because I was 73. My legs were failing because I had stopped giving them a reason to stay strong. Sitting there at the table, looking at those numbers, I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. I realized that if I did not fix this, the garage floor was just the beginning. The stairs would become a mountain. The trips out to the driveway to work on my truck would stop entirely. The ability to chase my 4 grandkids around the backyard would disappear. So I decided to build a defense right then and there. I started reading. I started asking questions. I started looking at the exact mechanics of how an aging muscle operates and what it needs to survive. After months of trial, error, and paying very close attention to how my body responded, I tracked down a specific list of 5 daily physical movements that completely changed the landscape of my lower body. I realized my legs were starving for these exact 5 mechanical actions. I am going to walk you through all 5 of them right now. I will tell you exactly what they do and why your legs are begging for them. And I need you to pay very close attention to the 5th movement on this list. It is something almost no one associates with leg strength, but it was the exact key that finally removed the heavy, dead feeling of exhaustion from my lower half. Let us start with the first movement I had to bring into my life. For years, I believed that as long as I was still walking around the house and doing a little yard work, my thighs were getting enough exercise. I was completely wrong. The villain here is the furniture we sit on. We spend our entire retirement sinking into deep, comfortable armchairs and soft couches. When you sink into a soft chair, you do not use your leg muscles to sit down. You just fall backward and let gravity do the work. And when you stand up, you use your arms to push off the armrests. My daughter Megan explained to me that the muscles on the front of your thighs, your quadriceps, are the primary brakes for your entire body. When you stop using them to control your descent into a chair, they shrink rapidly. I read a piece of clinical observation she gave me showing that seniors who lost the ability to stand up from a chair without using their hands had a drastically higher rate of overall physical decline. The muscle fibers simply forgot how to carry a heavy load. I call this first movement the chair push. I started practicing it every single day in my living room. I would stand in front of my hardest, straightest dining room chair. I would cross my arms flat across my chest so I could not use them to cheat, and then I would slowly, painfully, slowly lower myself down until my backside just barely touched the wood, and then I would immediately push the floor away and stand back up. The first time I tried it, I could not even do 3 in a row. My thighs burned like they were on fire, but I kept doing it. I shared this with an old buddy of mine from the warehouse named Arthur. Arthur is 68 years old, spent 20 years driving a forklift, and he was complaining to me over coffee that he felt trapped in his own recliner at home. He said he had to rock back and forth 3 times just to build enough momentum to stand up. I told him about the chair push. I told him his brakes were failing. He started practicing it at his kitchen table every morning. It took about 2 months, but we were standing in the parking lot of the hardware store when he told me the fear of sitting down in public was completely gone. He said he was rising out of booths at the diner with one smooth motion. He finally gave his engine the heavy load it was missing. The second movement I had to learn targets the absolute most neglected part of the aging body, the lower leg. When we get older, we start changing the way we walk. We stop picking our feet up. We start shuffling. We drag our toes across the carpet. We wear heavy supportive shoes that do all the work for us. What I did not know, and what nobody ever bothers to explain, is that your calf muscle is literally the second heart of your body. Your main heart pumps the blood down to your feet, but it relies on the hard, physical contraction of your calf muscles to pump that heavy blood back up against gravity. When you shuffle your feet, your calf muscles stop contracting fully. The blood pools in your lower legs. Your ankles swell. Your legs feel incredibly heavy and tired by 3 in the afternoon, and you think it is just old age. It is not old age. It is a broken pump. I found a piece of research tracking older adults with chronic lower leg fatigue and ankle swelling. The group that performed deliberate daily calf contractions saw a massive improvement in circulation and a huge drop in that heavy, dead feeling. I started doing what I call the step edge lift. I would go to the bottom wooden stair in my hallway, hold onto the wall for balance, put the balls of my feet on the edge of the stair, and let my heels drop down toward the floor. Then I would push up as high as I could onto my tiptoes, holding it for a full second at the top. I did this 20 times a day. I gave this movement to my neighbor, Henry. Henry is 75. He loves his vegetable garden more than anything, but he was giving up his evening walks because his lower legs felt like they were wrapped in lead weights by the end of the day. His ankles were always puffy. He started doing the step edge lift on a block of wood out in his garage. A week and a half later, I was out washing my truck when he walked over to the fence. The swelling around his socks was gone. He grabbed the top of the chain link and told me he had walked the full 2-mile loop at the park without stopping. The second heart in his legs was finally pumping the blood back out. The heavy lead weights were gone. That brings me to the third vital piece of this puzzle, and this one addresses the complete dead zone in the aging body. The muscles on the back of your legs. We spend decades sitting on our wallets. We drive our cars, we sit at desks, we sit in recliners. By constantly sitting on our glutes and our hamstrings, we are physically compressing the nerves and starving those muscles of blood flow. They basically go to sleep and never wake up. The problem is that the muscles on the back of your legs are the true powerhouse of your entire skeletal structure. When they go dead, your lower back has to do all the heavy lifting. That is why so many men my age have terrible, crippling lower back pain every time they try to bend over and pick something up off the floor. We are using a fragile spine to do the job of massive leg muscles. I read a fascinating paper looking at hundreds of seniors, proving that re-engaging the posterior chain completely altered their lower back mechanics and reduced their pain. I started doing the hip drive. I would lie flat on my back on the living room rug, bend my knees so my feet were flat on the floor, and I would push my heels violently into the carpet, lifting my hips up toward the ceiling until my body formed a straight line from my knees to my shoulders. I would squeeze the muscles in the back of my legs as hard as I could. My son Derek runs a commercial HVAC business here in town. He employs a lot of guys my age who have been crawling around in tight spaces and hauling heavy compressors for 30 years. One of his senior technicians is a guy named Carl who is 66. Carl was getting to the point where his lower back was seizing up every time he tried to lift an air conditioning unit out of the back of a truck. He thought his career was over. Derek knew I had been working on this, so he told Carl what I learned about the dead zone and the hip drive. Carl was desperate enough to try it. He started doing it on the floor of the break room before his shift. It was not a fast fix, but about 3 months later, Carl sat down with my son and told him the sharp, stabbing pain in his lower back was fading away. He said his legs were finally carrying the load again rather than his fragile spine. He put the powerhouse back online. The fourth movement I had to bring back into my life is the one that prevents the thing we are all quietly terrified of: the fall. Balance is not something you either have or you do not have. Balance is a physical reflex, and it is a muscle memory that degrades rapidly if you do not test it. As we get older, we subconsciously stop testing our balance. We lean on shopping carts at the grocery store. We hold the bathroom counter while we brush our teeth. We always make sure we have 3 points of contact. Because we never challenge our balance, the tiny, intricate stabilizing muscles around our ankles and our knees completely atrophy. When those tiny muscles die, your body loses the ability to make split-second corrections when you step on an uneven piece of pavement. You do not catch yourself. You just go down. Megan showed me a clinical observation of older patients proving that the number of seconds a senior can stand on one leg is a direct predictor of their risk for a catastrophic fall. My wife Linda is the one who made me take this seriously. We were walking out to the mailbox one afternoon after a light rain. She stepped on a wet patch of leaves on the concrete. Her foot slipped just an inch, and her entire body panicked. She grabbed my arm so hard she bruised it. She realized she had 0 reaction time left in her ankles. I started practicing the 1-foot anchor. Every morning while the coffee was brewing, I would stand in the kitchen, hover my hands an inch above the granite counter just in case, and lift 1 foot off the floor. I would try to hold it for 30 seconds. The first week, my ankle shook violently, twisting back and forth, trying to find stability. But I forced those tiny muscles to wake up. Linda started doing it with me. Within a few weeks, that violent shaking stopped. Her ankle became a solid block of wood. The next time it rained, she walked across the porch with her head up, stepping squarely. The reflex was moving fast and clear, all because we forced the stabilizers to do their job again. The fifth piece of this foundation is the one that baffles the doctors, but it changed everything for me. We spend all this time worrying about our knees and our hips, but we completely ignore the piece of machinery that actually touches the ground, our feet. For decades, I wore thick, heavy work boots with massive rubber soles. When I retired, I switched to thick, cushioned walking shoes. I thought I was protecting my joints. What nobody explained to me is that when you wrap your foot in a stiff cast of rubber, the 20 little intrinsic muscles inside your foot completely wither away. Your foot becomes a weak, mushy flipper. And when your foot is weak, the arch collapses. When the arch collapses, your knee caves inward. When your knee caves inward, you lose 30% of your leg strength instantly. I found a study tracking older adults who deliberately rebuilt the muscle strength inside their feet. The results showed a massive reduction in knee pain and a huge increase in standing power. I realized my feet were just dead blocks of flesh. I started doing the barefoot grip. I would take my shoes and socks off, put a hand towel flat on the hardwood floor, put my bare foot on the end of it, and use my toes to grab the fabric and scrunch it back toward my heel. I would do it over and over until the muscles in my arch cramped up. I shared this realization with an old friend from our church named Thomas. Thomas is 71, and he had completely given up climbing the stairs to the choir loft because his knees ached so badly. I sat with him in the pew after service and told him his knees were hurting because his feet were weak. I told him to take his shoes off and do the towel grab. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he listened. A month later, I was walking into the sanctuary and I saw Thomas climbing the wooden stairs to the loft, his stride steady and quiet. His knees were not grinding anymore because his feet finally had the muscular arch needed to support his weight. When you put these 5 movements together, the change is not some sudden overnight miracle. You do not wake up the next morning feeling like you are 30 years old again. That is not how the human body works, and anyone who tells you otherwise is trying to sell you a lie. But what does happen is a slow, undeniable lifting of a heavy burden. I woke up one Saturday morning, walked out to the garage to check the oil in the lawnmower, squatted down right onto the concrete, checked the dipstick, and then stood back up in one fluid, unbroken motion. I did not need to grab a workbench. I did not tremble. The deep, aching weakness that used to make me second-guess whether I should carry a heavy box was replaced by a solid, quiet trust in my own body. I did not feel like a man trying to helplessly manage his own decline anymore. I felt like a man who had finally taken control of the heavy machinery he lived inside. If you are sitting there right now and you know exactly what that quiet weakness in your thighs feels like when you try to stand up, or if you know the sheer panic of feeling your leg give out for just a split second, I want you to hear me clearly. You do not have to just accept the decline. Your body is not failing you out of spite. It is just crying out for the mechanical load it desperately needs to stay alive. Do not try to do all 5 of these movements by tomorrow morning. That never works. Just pick one thing. Start with the chair push in your living room to wake your thighs up. Or start doing the barefoot grip with a towel to save your knees. Give your foundation a fighting chance. The absolute, unavoidable truth of getting older is this: your independence begins and ends with the strength of your legs. If your legs go, your freedom goes right along with them. Do not wait until you are stuck on the cold concrete of your garage to start taking this seriously. Protect what you have left and rebuild what you thought you had lost forever. I'm going to head out to the backyard now. The grass needs cutting, and I have the leg drive to walk behind that mower all afternoon. I appreciate you sitting here and spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, start moving today, and I will be right here when you are ready to talk again.